All right. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And today we're doing a little bit of all three of those things mixed together, which is really exciting. This is also our second last hangout of the year. So for classes who have joined us throughout the year, thank you guys so much for an incredible year of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And we're so happy to nearly kick it off, or nearly end it off, with Parks Canada. Right now, we've got three classes joining us from across Canada, and I want to give them a chance to say hi. We've got Miss Bowen's grade 1s and 2s in Toronto, Ontario. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Awesome. We've got Miss Huxley's grade 5s in Brampton, Ontario. Hi, guys.
Hi.
And the closest, of course, to Banff, we've got Miss Biffort's grade 3s in Calgary, in Alberta. Hi, guys. Their mic didn't demute for me for some reason, but they're there and they're excited, and that's what matters. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speakers. We are joined live in Banff National Park in Alberta in Canada by Carolyn Heaton. So she is a public outreach officer for Banff National Park, and what she's going to walk us through today is conservation in action with bison. So how do you get one of the world's largest land mammals to repopulate a wilderness area? Well, we're going to learn a little bit about that today. And so without further ado, for her first time joining us, thank you so much for being here today, Carolyn, and take it away.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Excellent. Awesome.
Yay. This is so cool. Thanks for joining us and learning more about Parks Canada and bison. Has anyone heard of bison or buffalo before? Just put your hands up. Yes, they happen to be the coolest animal and my favorite animal. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because here in Banff National Park, and put your hands up if you know where Banff is. Awesome. It's one of the best places in the world. And we're doing something really cool. We are reintroducing bison to Banff National Park. So today we're going to talk a bit about that, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions about what we're doing in Canada's first national park with bison. So without further ado, I'm just going to pop up my presentation here. And one last hands up. Who was watching basketball last night? Yes! I had to do it. Okie dokie.
All right. I'll let you know when you're all good. Wants to work. You can save species together. Sometimes Google Hangouts present some difficulties. That's okay.
So is the wrong screen showing right now?
Right now, I've got your first slide up with your notes underneath it and your slide deck on the left. That's okay. But while you've been doing this, we've got two of our classes join us. So hello to Miss Metternach's class joining us from Calgary, and Miss Miller's class joining us from Brampton as well. So we've got both our Calgary, both our Bramptons, and Toronto for good measure.
Oh, there we go. No. Oh, no.
That's okay. Almost.
All right, we're going to try that again.
Take your time.
Okay.
Bison.
Come on, technology, work with us.
So you're back. Yeah. Almost. This is where you got it from last time. There you go. You're perfect. Go.
Awesome.
Oh, it ended. I don't know.
What's going on?
That's okay. Sorry for the wait, guys. Give it 2 seconds. We'll get there, Carolyn.
Okay, are we good?
We are good. You're golden.
Yay. Okay, so thanks, everybody. I'm a first timer. So today we are going to talk about the 5 steps to bring bison back to Banff National Park. And right in front of you, those are 3 of our Banff bison in our Banff bison herd. So just to take a step back here, I'm calling in from Banff National Park. But Banff is only one of a whole network of national parks across the country. And it's great that you guys are all from different parts of Canada because there's likely a national park near you. And what we do with Parks Canada is protect some of Canada's most special places. And that, for us here in Banff, that means a network of mountains and rivers, but across the country, there are these special places that we protect and also welcome people like you to come and visit us and learn more. And in this case, join us on the internet and learn about what we're doing with conservation here in Banff. And that's us right there under the red circle. But to take an even farther step back, bison, as some of you put your hand up that you already heard about bison, so you've likely heard about this before. There used to be huge herds of bison across much of North America. So many bison that some people reported hearing the ground shaking. And sometimes if you wanted to get from place to place, you'd have to wait for days for a big herd of bison to cross by. And even right here in Banff, we had bison too. So bison lived here in the Rocky Mountains, going back 10,000 years. But unfortunately, like most of the bison in North America, bison disappeared from what is now Banff National Park due to overhunting and loss of habitat. And we very nearly lost them completely. So they nearly went extinct, but luckily, less than 1,000 individual bison survived, which doesn't seem like a lot because there used to be over 30 million bison, but luckily it was just enough to give bison a second chance. So this is one of the most powerful and tragic photos that I've ever seen. So that huge mountain that you see in front of you, that is all bison skulls. So after bison were killed across North America, people would collect their bones like this and then ship them away for use to refine sugar and other things. But this just shows you the scale of how many bison that we lost. And losing bison is a big deal because they're so important. Bison are what are called a keystone species. So that means that through the behaviors that they do, so grazing and creating habitat, they benefit hundreds of other species. So they're really important for other animals like bugs and birds and bears. Like for example, bison have a big fur coat, and birds will actually come and take some of the fur to use in their nests. And they also create big open areas that help other animals like elk, who like to eat grass too, and those little ground squirrels you can see in the picture, who like to make their burrows in where bison have been. So it was really important for us to try to bring them back to Banff. So what we're doing is a 5-year pilot project where we are reintroducing bison to Banff. So it's important also because even for people across the country, like you guys, even if you don't see bison in Banff, the story of their recovery and the return to Banff is so inspiring. And it gives us a chance to do things like this, where we share with you guys what we've been working on. Bison also have a really important cultural presence across North America with many indigenous cultures. So reconnecting people and bison is really important too. And as I mentioned before, bison are an integral part of the Banff landscape, and they walked these valleys for over 10,000 years. And lastly, Parks Canada has been protecting bison for over a century. And so by bringing bison to Banff, we're just continuing this long story of trying to give bison a brighter future. So how do you do this? They're North America's largest land mammal, and it's not easy to reintroduce them to a new place. So step one, We got our bison from another national park that has bison, and that is Elk Island National Park. It's also in Alberta, just outside of Edmonton, and that's the heart of bison conservation for Parks Canada. Now for our presentation today, we're going to be following this bison. This is cow number 15. She grew up in Elk Island, and when we brought her to Banff, she was a 2-year-old, and she was also pregnant. So you can see with her ear tag there, we use ear tags to track individuals in our herd so we can learn more about who they are, track their health and behavior. And you might notice on her horns, there's something funny going on. So those are horn tubes. It's basically garden hose, and you'll see why this is important in a second. But we added those to her horns to help protect the bison from each other, so they didn't poke each other because they have these really sharp horns. So for our reintroduction project, we started small and we went slow, and we started with 16 bison from Elk Island National Park. Number 15 was one of them, and 10 of them were pregnant females. So after we gave them those horn covers and the ear tags, we actually loaded them onto these special containers and had three or four bison in each one of those. They were specially designed for bison, and we started a long road trip to where we would base camp our reintroduction transportation. So we started this long road trip overnight, leaving from Elk Island National Park in our little fleet of bison in the trucks, and we drove overnight to what's called the Yahatinda Ranch on the border of Banff National Park. And the reason that we had to stage there is there's no roads that go into the place where we started our reintroduction. So we needed to fly them in. So overnight we staged at the Yahatinda Ranch, and then early the next morning, a helicopter came and picked up each of those containers and lifted them. It was about a 20-minute flight into the backcountry. So this is from a GoPro that we actually had in the container with the bison. So you can see that they're pretty calm, and they're just enjoying the first flight of their lives. So these are true flying bison, a very rare species. And then when they arrived, we gently lowered those containers. And when all the containers had arrived, our staff carefully opened up the containers, and our 16 bison had arrived safe and sound, and they were now free to explore the backcountry of Banff National Park. Pretty cool picture. I love that one. So after the bison had arrived, we had our second step, which was to care for the herd in a pasture in Banff National Park. So instead of just opening those containers and letting them go wherever they pleased, we actually did something called a soft release. So we had the bison in an enclosed pasture to help them bond to the landscape and really anchor to this place and adopt it as their new home. So for 1.5 years, we had this pasture in the heart of our bison reintroduction area. And we had a staff person, like what you see in front of you, who had the coolest job in the world. And their job was to care for our bison herd. So every single day we had someone there, and they were monitoring the herd, making sure they were healthy. And also we gave them some food while they were in captivity to help them transition. And while they were in the soft release pasture, this is number 15 again, in that 1.5 years, they had 2 calving seasons. So calving is really important to bison because they tend to return to the same places year after year to calve. So it's a really safe and comfortable place for them. So we wanted them to feel that safety and comfort in the center of what we hope that they will adopt as their new home range. So it was super lucky. Over 2 calving seasons, we had 100% success rate. So our 10 cows gave birth to 10 calves both years and added 20 new bison to our herd. And as of within the past few weeks, Every one of those calves is still growing up and still a part of the herd, which is pretty cool. And since they were coming from Elk Island, which is outside Edmonton, they came from a place that was pretty flat and it had no running water. So while they were in the soft release pasture, they had a chance to learn some new mountain skills. So this is one of the first times that these bison ever crossed a river in their entire lives. And they also had to learn how to drink from a river too. They also learned how to climb steep mountain slopes. So in this picture, that's a cow and her 1 or 2 day old calf who's keeping up with mom, no problem. And these skills would come in a lot of handy once we release the bison into the wild, which is our next step. So this past July, we had a great honor, and I got to be here in this very moment of opening the fence that had maintained them in that enclosure for 1.5 years and release them into the wild. And this is one of the best days of my life. It was so cool to be a part of, and everyone was really excited. So we cut this fence and we opened it up, and then we just expected them to just find that opening right away. So we were all excited. We're all set up and waiting and watching, and then we waited and we waited and we waited, and eventually we went to bed. But we set up some cameras, and we saw that overnight at around midnight, under the cover of darkness, they all streamed out of the pasture and into the wild. And what they did next was incredible. So the very next day, we went out to go and see where they were. And we looked and we looked and we looked in the valley, and eventually we started looking up. And under that red dot is where we found some of them. So that is 2 cows and their 2 newborn calves on the top of that mountain. And they went up and down on this little crest here for weeks on end, eating the fresh little bits of grass at the top of the mountain. Not bad for some prairie bison. Meanwhile, the rest of the herd, so number 15 was in this herd, they were exploring all kinds of cool terrain. So this is a high alpine lake, and these are that's the bison herd right there. Now, before I show you, can anyone find where the bison are in this picture? You just point them out in your classes.
We can ask some classes if you'd like to.
Does one class want to try to point it out?
Yeah, let's see. So Miss Bowen's class, any idea where you think the bison are?
Dia, do you know where they are? Can you go and show them?
Do you think?
You can tell me if my mouse is getting hotter or colder.
You think?
Colder.
Colder? Okay.
We can't see your screen.
We can.
Now. Oh. There you go.
There you go.
Oh.
The grass areas.
Am I getting closer?
Was it in the middle? Closer.
Closer. Oh. Oh.
Oh, am I on them?
Looks like it.
Boom. There they are. So this is on a mountainside, right where the rock hits the last little bits of grass. Isn't that cool? We were not expecting that. And this is on the map where the bison are. So you can see at the Yahatina Ranch, so that's where we drove into. And then the soft release pasture was in the Panther Valley. And this whole green area is what we call the reintroduction zone. So for the next, until 2022, so for the next few years, we're hoping the bison will explore the landscape in this green area and adopt it as their new home range. So now we're on step 4, which is the most exciting part of this project, where we get to learn from the bison. And it's a kind of cool transition for us because in the soft release phase, we were helping the bison learn how to live in the mountains. And now we are learning from them because they are free to explore, and we get to learn every single day where they're going, what they're doing, what they're eating, and it's really exciting. And it kind of feels like we are discovering a new species. So one of the main tools we're using is a GPS collar. So before we released the herd, we GPS collared all of the adult animals. And those actually communicate with satellites, and we can see their locations on our computer. So every few hours, their locations will beam up to this computer program, and then we can put together little animations like this that show you where the bison have been going. So this little animation is from one of the bison in the main herd, and it shows the first 6 to 8 months of their journey in the wild in Banff. So during the summertime when we release them, because we released them in the end of July, they stayed in the high alpine zone for the first few months that they were released. And that was just an incredible thing to see. And then what we noticed is that as the snow line started to move down the valley, so did the bison. So they spent, and what you're seeing right now is the fall and winter. They moved into this area, which is a lot more open and a lot lower in the valley. And that's where they spent the winter because typically in those areas, there's not a lot of snow. And so they're able to still find food in the middle of the winter. This is so another tool we use is having staff on the ground to actually track the bison. Again, the coolest job ever. So every few weeks, we have a team that goes into the backcountry and uses those collars to locate the herd. And so they can monitor them, do a count, do any health observations. And sometimes, like what Sandy's doing here, is she's helping gently direct the bison to a different valley. So we use these tools called natural stockmanship to gently move the bison, because we know where a lot of the good grazing spots are, but they're so new to this place. And so for the first little while, we're kind of holding their hooves instead of their hands and introducing them to their new home. We have a fleet of remote cameras out on the landscape, and this helps us get a behind-the-scenes look at what the herd is doing. And this is some of the things that we've noticed. So this is in the fall, winter, so that's that big open place that they spent the colder months. And as you can see in this video, they just look so comfortable. And that little guy in the middle there is one of the new calves of that year. And then in the depth of winter, this shows you how bison use their big heads to move the snow and find dried grasses, kind of like eating a fruit roll-up or a granola bar to keep them through the winter. So they use their face kind of like a snow plow, and which other animals really like an elk, because the elk or the deer will follow behind the bison into areas that they've opened up with their face snow plows to get at some of those dried grasses. And I have the great privilege of walking into the area where the bison are right now. And so they were spending some time in this big wide open valley. And this was one of the best days of my life because we were seeing some of the changes that we were expecting to see happening already on a small scale. So I walked into this meadow and there were no bison around, but the presence of them was everywhere. So you could smell the bison. They have this kind of like rich, earthy smell. There was poop everywhere, which is full of nutrients that helps new plants grow. And as you can see in this picture, they've really grazed down, and grasses have been evolved to be grazed. It helps them regenerate and sprout out all these new delicious shoots. So we're seeing that happen right now in this picture. There were ground squirrels running around. There was hair caught in the trees. It was really quite an incredible thing. they were also busy making new wallows. So bison will roll on the ground in the same place, and they'll end up making these divots in the ground. And sometimes they can fill up with water and become seasonal wetlands. And so we're already seeing that happen right now. And as they're grazing and creating new wallows, they're also uncovering older wallows that ancient bison made over 150 years ago. And so they're just following in the footsteps of their ancestors. And that's a clump of bison fur. As you can see, it's so lush and soft. And they'll shed their whole coat during the spring. So then, yeah, birds will come and pick that right off the branch and use it to keep their chicks warm. So this is another one of these incredible pictures. So we're going back to, this is in the soft release pasture. And can a classroom help me guess which side of this picture bison spent time? So you can see there's kind of this strict line in the middle there.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll ask Ms. Huxley's class. What do you guys think? Are bison on the right or the left?
Right.
Oh, and
We can ask.
it's actually the opposite.
Mind blown.
Mind blown. So we'd expect to see, like, if something's being grazed, to see it look kind of bare. So this photo was taken just over a week ago, and bison haven't been there in around a year, but we're seeing this beautiful, fresh regrowth from the areas that they were grazing and leaving their poops everywhere. So this photo just totally blew my mind that bison have this power to rejuvenate the landscape, and they were meant for this place. And over time, we might see these same effects happening over a wider landscape. And as bison return into the landscape as they were for 10,000 years. So we're seeing it happen right now. And the last step is to follow the herd. And this is your job. And in this photo, you can see the bison right in the bottom right-hand corner there, our little mountain bison. Bison, these animals are in one of the hardest to get to places, but we're trying really hard to bring stories from the herd to people like you across Canada. So you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we put up, we have a web series on our Parks Canada YouTube channel, and we'll have more videos coming out soon. And then on our website, parkscanada.gc.ca/Banff Bison, we actually have a blog from the field. And so we update that with stories from the bison herd every month or so. So you can follow what our bison are doing as they return to their home. And that is the end of the presentation. So now it's time for questions, which is always the best part. So I'm just going to switch my screen here, and then we'll transition to the question and answer period.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Carolyn. That was marvelous. And your passion for bison, in the fact that you said twice in that presentation that it was the best days of your life, I think that's a really good sign. All right, we've got 5 classes live. We've got a whole bunch watching, 8 right now watching on YouTube. So if you guys want to type in your questions, just let me know where you guys are coming from and what grade you guys are, and I'll pass them along. But let's start with Miss Bowen's class. If you guys want to kick us off with a question, come on up.
You want to read it, Saeed? This one?
How long bison live?
Oh, could you repeat that? Louder?
How long do bison live, and do they have any predators?
That is a great question. So in the wild, bison are actually pretty long-lived. So they can live anywhere between 15 to 20-ish years. And in captivity, they might live up to 30 years. And in the wild, they have to contend with predators. So bison co-evolved with wolves. So wolves are one of the natural predators of bison, and people, of course. And we also have active wolf packs in Banff National Park. So what we are hoping, and I know it's sad, but it's a circle of life, that bison and wolves will reestablish their predator-prey relationship. And wolves hopefully will learn how to hunt bison, because it's not easy. In other reintroductions, it's taken between 3 and 20 years for wolves to learn how to hunt bison, because they travel in a big herd and they have their sharp horns, and so they're not easy to hunt. But we're hoping that over time they will learn those skills And so we had some wolves that had GPS collars too. So we know from our data that they have overlapped, and they know that they are in the neighborhood. They've been sniffing each other out. But as far as we know, no one's been eaten yet, but it could happen anytime.
Okay, very cool. All right, Miss Huxley's class, if you guys want to come on up.
How many bison are there in Banff National Park right now?
Well, you know what? It's a bit of an unknown right now. As of the past few months, we've had 34 animals in the herd. And in past years, we've been able to predict more or less how many bison we'll have because we were doing pregnancy checks on the cows. But now we are in calving season, but our bison are wild. So we didn't do pregnancy checks this year. And so we might have 34 bison, but we may have also had new calves join the herd that we haven't met yet. So that's a good question, and a question that I can't answer until we get more information from the field or see a new calf on one of our remote cameras.
Very cool. All right. Well, we look forward to hearing about that, and that's why you need to follow up with all the stuff they passed along at the end. All right. Miss Biffert's class, if you guys want to come on up, go for it.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Is the bison the same as the buffalo?
That is a question we get all the time. And the answer is that all bison are buffalo, but not all buffalo are bison. It's a little bit of a tricky answer. Yeah. So buffalo is a common word for bison. So bison's the more scientific name for a bison, but I call them buffalo to you. You can call them buffalo. You can call them bison. And they're interchangeable. But there are also distant cousins to the bison called the water buffalo and the Cape Horn buffalo. And you couldn't call them bison. You could just call them buffalo. And they're distantly related. So they're like very ancient cousins. But you can definitely call a bison a buffalo. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Miss Miller's class, you guys came a little late, so you need to come and demute your own mic. So just top of your screen, little microphone symbol, and when you do that, I'll let you know, and you'll be good to go to ask your question. Perfect.
How long,
Hi.
how long will it take for the bison population to regenerate to its full health?
You know what? That is a tough question. And for the Banff project, we have a 5-year pilot project. And so by the end of our 5 years, we might have up to 60 or 80 or 100 bison, which is pretty wild. And in this area, historically, there weren't that many bison. So the Rocky Mountains were on the edge of their traditional range. So we might already be kind of getting towards that historical levels of bison population health. But that's only one part of the bison story. So as you can remember from the beginning of my presentation, bison used to roam across most of North America. And if you've been traveling around, you probably haven't seen bison walking down the street. So there are small areas where bison still roam free. So it's primarily in protected areas like national parks. So for Parks Canada, you can see bison at Elk Island National Park and Grasslands National Park and other places, but you're not going to see them in between for the most part. And I think that's something that we have to think about, like as a culture, kind of moving forward. Like we need more places for bison to roam. But for Parks Canada, we're trying to do our best bringing bison back to places where we know that they have been before. So that's what we're trying to do our part here. But it's only one piece of the greater conservation puzzle for bison.
Outstanding. And I mean, as you show with the slide, I mean, we saw how rich the ecosystem became when bison were allowed to graze there. So that was a fantastic photo and a great testament to what you guys are doing. All right, Miss Veterinar's class, if you guys have a question, come on up.
Go ahead.
Yep, you're good.
Are buffalo herbivores or carnivores?
Ah,
Also a good question. Bison are not going to eat you. They love grass. Yeah. They look kind of big and scary. They can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, but they are focused on the greens. So they are herbivores, and they like to eat grass, branches sometimes. But don't worry, if you meet a bison, it will not eat you.
can you imagine how terrifying it would be, though? If the Banff herd became like carnivores. Anyway, I'm going to pass along 2 questions from groups online, and then we'll do a whole other round with questions here. So we have Miss Orton's class joining us from Toronto, and they want to know sort of 2 related questions. Do you have a favorite bison, Carolyn? And do you name the bison, or are they always kept as numbers?
I think we all have our personal names, but from like the conservation biology side, we like to kind of keep our distance and give these bison numbers. Although the new bison in our herd, so ones that were born last year and the ones that will presumably be born this year, they will be anonymous, just wild bison with no number. But sometimes the number even itself gives you kind of an attachment to them. My personal favorite bison right now is this calf that was born, the very last calf, born at the end of September this past year, which is, it happens, it's a bit more unusual. Our bison are on a bit of a delayed calving cycle. So typically bison will calve in the early spring. So right now, bison calves are popping out all over the place where there are bison herds. But this bison was born at the end of September, so snow was already falling, and this little red baby was trying to keep up with the rest of the herd, and we were all nervous for it because it's not easy surviving the winter as such a small little critter. But on our recent remote camera photos and videos, she made it. So I like to call her Baby Red because her fur is so red. Because when the calves are first born, they have this really reddish fur, but they tend to lose it within the first couple of months as they get their more adult fur. But she kept her red fur the whole winter, and she'll lose it over time, but she's got a little place in my heart as our survivor bison.
Well, that is adorable.
Yeah.
All right. We had a question from Miss Archibald's class too, also joining us from Toronto, which is, do you tranquilize the bison when you did that whole journey, either in the car or in the helicopter? Were they sedated in any way, or were they totally coherent?
That's a good question. Parks Canada does tranquilize animals if we need to handle them in close quarters. So in one of the pictures later in the presentation where we applied those GPS collars, you can't get that close to a bison without it being tranquilized. So we have a veterinarian on staff, so it's done really calmly and safely. And then after all the procedures are done, you give them a reversal, and then they're up and standing within seconds and on their way. For our bison, when we brought them from Elk Island National Park, we actually didn't tranquilize them, but we did give them a mild sedative because it is, you can imagine being a wild bison and all of a sudden you find yourself in a helicopter flying over the mountains. You can imagine that be kind of a scary experience. So we wanted to make sure that they stayed nice and calm and relaxed through the whole journey. So as you can tell in the pictures, it definitely worked. So they didn't fall asleep for the most part. They were just resting and relaxed. And it definitely worked because when they arrived, they pretty much arrived without any injuries, and they all arrived safe and sound. So that was a really good question.
Awesome. All right, I know we're getting close to lunch for some of the classes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up just with an overview of where classes can learn more. So we'll do some quick ones. I'm going to go to Ms. Bowen's class because I know you guys have a bunch of classes in today. So if you guys have a second question, Ms. Bowens, come on up.
Jusha, go ahead.
Does bison travel together?
Do they always travel together in a herd, or do they travel alone?
Ah, great question.
Another great question. So bison are in general herd animals. So especially the mamas and the babies, they'll walk together in these big groups. But then sometimes, especially for the bulls, they'll travel on their own. So this past winter, the main herd was all hanging out together, but we actually had one bull leave the herd, went to a totally other valley, and spent months and months and months by himself, all alone, and he ended up spending more time interacting with wolves than he interacted with other bison. So it's really common with bulls to go off during the winter. And then everyone tends to come back together for the calving season and the mating season, which is the spring and summer.
Very cool. Thank you so much. All right, let's go to Ms. Biffert's class. If you guys want to come demute your mic for a second question. I love when I ask a class and like every hand goes up. That's like the best feeling.
Yeah!
And you're good to go. Yeah.
I wonder what we as grade 3 students could do to help support the bison.
Awesome.
Yes! That's a great question. That's my favorite question. Well, you could definitely follow our story and tell all your friends. So you can go, if you wanted to keep learning about our bison herd, if you go on YouTube, just YouTube Banff Bison. We have a bunch of videos on there you can watch and learn more. Follow our blog, which we put up every month. Best way to find that is just go on Google, search Banff Bison. They're the first ones that come up. And then you can also visit other places that have bison and learn more. So across Parks Canada, also if you're traveling in the States, they also have bison in certain places like Yellowstone and that I mentioned. So the more you learn more and share it with your friends and your family and tell everyone how cool bison are and tell them to follow our Banff Bison. That is something that you can do to help bison.
Outstanding. You know what? That's a perfect question to end on. So what I just want to encourage the classes to do, go to Banff as well. If you guys get a chance, certainly the Calgary classes are right next door. Head to Banff. It's an amazing place, one of the most beautiful places in Canada and the whole world. And for the Ontario classrooms, if you can't make it out to Alberta, there's national parks all over Ontario, and they're really a remarkable resource place with amazing people like Carolyn who can explain anything and everything and share their passion with you guys. So, Carolyn, without further ado, what we always do at the end of every hangout, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. And so, boys and girls, if you guys could get ready to join me in saying a huge thank you to Carolyn for joining us today. Everyone is now demuted. Go right ahead. So much. Awesome, guys. Thank you guys so much. You guys were great. Such enthusiastic questions. Carolyn, that was marvelous. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you. Have a great